And I'm going to check in on our council members that are not currently present. As far as I know, they were planning to attend, but let me check, okay?
Very good.
You know what? I didn't go home. I left my book at home. Do we need our book here? No. Okay. Okay. Bye. Did you print out? Huh? Yeah, I got my printouts. It looks like we're just waiting for Suzanne. Teresa's helping her get on.
Can everybody hear me? Teresa, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. I can hear you and see you.
Thank you.
Suzanne should be here momentarily. She was having technical issues.
Do we want to get started with just our opening? And maybe Suzanne will be on by then, so we're not sitting here waiting. Okay, so welcome everybody. I'm glad that we can see all of our beautiful faces, except for you, Russ. Yours is not so pretty, even though you did shave for us. Thanks. Monica, do you want to say something before we start?
Sure. I have an introduction for Ann Macfarlane, majored in Russian and Ancient Greek at the University of California, Santa Cruz. She received a Marshall Scholarship awarded by the British government and earned a second degree at Cambridge University in England. She then joined the U.S. Foreign Service, serving as a diplomat in Pakistan and on the Soviet desk of the U.S. State Department. After marrying fellow Foreign Service officer Lou Macfarlane, Ann became a stay-at-home mom in the Congo, Tanzania, and Nepal. On returning to Seattle, Ann became a Russian translator and was elected president of the American Translators Association. Since developing Jurassic Parliament in 2000, she trains elected officials, staff, and nonprofit board members across the nation. Ann is a professional registered parliamentarian. With Andrew E. Stepp, she is the author of Mastering Council Meetings.
All right. Welcome, Ann.
Thank you so much, Madam Mayor.
The floor is yours.
Well, I'm thrilled to be here because Robert's Rules and Jurassic Parliament is one of my favorite things in the entire universe. But if you say to most people, oh, let's spend a beautiful April evening with Robert's Rules of Order, you're going to really enjoy it. It's about like saying you're going to love your root canal procedure. So thank you. Thank you for having me and thank you for being here. I will confess that although it may sound odd, I believe that Robert's Rules of Order is a terrible book. Robert originally was a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. In fact, one of his first assignments was on San Juan Island when he built the redoubt that was going to protect us from the British in 1859. And when he published his first book in 1876, it was a pocket manual. It would literally fit into your pocket. And I believe that over the years, his descendants have kept on improving that book until they've wrecked it. A very common procedure. Anybody who's tried to buy a plain cup of coffee in Starbucks knows what I'm talking about here. But there's a core to Robert's Rules that we really need. There's a core that's essential for good and fair meetings. And that's what Jurassic Parliament is all about. And that's what I'm going to be sharing with you this evening. So I'm going to share my screen here. And I invite you to put yourselves on mute, but to keep your video on. It's very nice to be able to see people's faces. And let me just do that again. Here we go. So these are the topics that we're going to be covering today. It's quite a lot, but I think we'll be able to get through it without much ado. We'll talk about meeting discussion, point of order and appeal, how to do this, motions and amendments, who's in charge, if you oppose the decision, inappropriate remarks, the right kind of control, and we'll have a review and next steps. And we will take a 5-minute break in about an hour, since sitting in front of Zoom is so exhausting. So I want to begin by saying that my purpose today, I hope to invigorate you to run effective meetings to serve your community. And I use the word invigorate because we tend to do things in the same old way. We tend to have a pattern and we tend to follow it. And sometimes it takes a different viewpoint, a different perspective to give us new energy to tackle our assignments. After taking this training, you'll be able to describe how the authority of the group is more important than any single individual, even the chair. You'll be able to make motions and amendments. You'll be able to choose your board's discussion rules to improve efficiency, and you'll be able to make the personal commitment that's necessary to run effective meetings. So it looks like we've had our last council member join us. Suzanne, thank you for coming. Great to have you here. So I want to quickly say that this is strictly based on the principles and practices of parliamentary procedure. I'm not an attorney, and nothing in this presentation constitutes legal advice. If your attorney tells you something different, listen to your attorney. So let's begin with a thought experiment. Let's imagine that vaccinations are widespread and life is coming back to normal, and it's possible again to travel and even to travel overseas. And so you have made a nice little plan for yourself. You're going to visit Paris or New York or Sydney, and you go down to the airport there at SeaTac, the International Airport, and you've got your carry-on bag and you trundle your way down the steps and you go into the 747 and you strap yourself in, and you notice that in this airplane, there's you and there are 346 chimpanzees. Now, what are the odds that you're going to arrive safely at your destination in New York, Paris, or Sydney? The odds are 0 because chimpanzees when they are annoyed with each other, and certainly being strapped into a 747 is annoying, take it out by fighting. They take it out by physical combat. They interact with each other in a ferocious way. And I think that it would have, such an experiment would have very dire consequences for the chimps themselves and for any human who was in there as well. Now, I'm not propounding any theories here. I just want to point out that when we analyze the DNA of chimpanzees and of humans, the match is 99.8%. There's only 1.2% difference in the DNA of chimps and of humans. But we are better than chimps. Humans are better. Most adult human beings are peaceful and compliant, especially people who go in for local government. And when group expectations are clear, they will follow them. So many of our councils and local governments do just fine. And we have this kind of meeting going on where everybody is in their place and all is as it should be. But sometimes the meeting deteriorates, and sometimes it can turn into a hockey match where people are fighting for control of the goal and where they're interacting with each other in a ferocious way. So there's a solution. And the solution, in our view, is to adopt common guidelines as a group and make a personal and wholehearted commitment to following them. Now, you might be saying, personal, wholehearted, what is this, a revival meeting? I thought you was going to talk to us about rules. Well, emotion is the artesian spring of our being. Emotion is far more important than procedure. It's because of your dedication and your emotional commitment to your city that you are giving up these hours and hours that you dedicate to the city of Selah and to your meetings. William James once said, intellect is a speck on the sea of emotion. You may be familiar with the saying of the famous French philosopher René Descartes. He said, I think, therefore I am. So a modern psychologist, Dr. Keltner, has said that he really should have said, I feel, therefore I am. Feeling is critical to how we act as human beings. So I'm going to present you with some ideas today, but I want to contrast for you the example of me when I was a teenager being introduced to the idea of flossing. I was lying back in the dentist chair and the dentist was explaining it, and I was nodding sweetly because I was a compliant, good little girl. But inside, I was thinking, ooh, gross, you're not going to get me to do that. So if you listen to what I say today and you think, oh, gross, you're not going to get me to do that, then your city will have wasted its time and wasted its money on this training. I'm really asking for a conversion of heart. Your personal commitment is essential to achieving the goal of better meetings. I used to talk about rules, and now I've realized that no, I have to talk about people and about what they care about. So let's begin by talking about meeting discussion, point of order, and appeal. So the workshop method is we're going to be in the League of Northwest Dino Cities. It's not entirely realistic, it's a fantasy, but there's some overlap with real life. It's like drawing with crayons. And you are going to be the members of the Dinopolis City Council. So here's a map where you can see Dinopolis way down at the bottom. My late husband and I developed this map. There are 70 different cities in Dinopolis in the league, and each one has its own little project. So you're going to be the Dinopolis City Council members. Now, the first thing that you do, obviously, at a meeting is you call it to order. You sit in the chair reserved for the person running the meeting. And chair in this instance has two meanings. One is the physical chair that you're in, and one is you with your authority as chair. You rap the gavel lightly one time and announce this meeting of the Dinopolis City Council is called to order. You lead the Pledge of Allegiance, you ask the clerk to take the roll, and you announce that a quorum is present or not. Now, I know you know this, but just for the record, I want to point out that the quorum is the minimum number of voting members who must be present for business to be done. And usually it's a majority, more than half of the members in office, the members who are actually serving on the council. So quorum is a passive condition and votes cast is an active condition. Quorum allows you to take action, allows you to cast your votes. And if you lose your quorum, you can't do business. And of course, for a public body, business includes discussion, hearing from the public, and so on. So now it comes time to approve the minutes, and a member says, Chair, these minutes have my remarks completely wrong. They say that I said the staff had done a great job arranging Community Relations Day, but what I actually said was that the staff had done a lousy job. I demand that this be corrected. Now, what do you think? Do you think that the member of the council can demand that the minutes be corrected? You can give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down as to what you think about this. Anybody want to guess? Okay, so I'm seeing mixed opinion there. The minutes are within the control of the body. The member can say that, but he doesn't have the right to insist that a change be made. It's up to the body itself to vote whether to make that change or not. But more to the point, why are these remarks in the minutes at all? Robert says that the purpose of minutes is to record the actions taken by the body. Minutes should record what is done and not what is said. So Jurassic Parliament would like to recommend to you that the city change its method of taking minutes and stop including all that detail in your text. We believe that detailed minutes are a bad idea for a number of reasons. It violates the fundamental purpose of minutes. It can create liability for the organization or individuals in case of a lawsuit, and this has happened. It tends to personalize and politicize the discussion. It can intimidate participants, preventing them from speaking freely. It absorbs too much staff time and it takes the group's time, and it makes it harder to find the actions taken. So we recommend either action minutes or summary minutes for a city council. And Jurassic Parliament strongly recommends that council comments and comments from the public should not be included in the minutes. So we have this paper, Guidelines for Meeting Minutes in Local Government, and I will send it to you after our session, along with the other various papers that I mentioned, as a package of reference materials. So now we're going to do an exercise in order to see some of the points that we're going to be covering later in the session. We're going to read a script, which I also asked to be sent to you, but I'm going to be showing it on the screen as well. So I want you to watch during the script for the following. Watch for rules for discussion, for inappropriate remarks, for point of order and appeal, and for when the chair is out of line. So I need volunteers for a number of roles. Now, let me mention that in real life, you would have to be recognized before you read this script. But in this exercise, we have numbers down the side of the page, so you don't need to be recognized. The numbers just take the place of recognition. So do I have any volunteers? I'm going to be the chair. So we need a banker. Anybody willing to be a banker? You can unmute and just speak up. Sherry will be the banker. Great. Then we need an elderly member.
If I could, Ann, I think we've already worked out who's who in the zoo on this.
Oh, great.
Yeah, Monica, can you summarize it for Ann, please?
I didn't have that email up. Hang on.
Okay.
That's great. You were proactive.
Actually, I think what Sherry had done was the other exercise that had all of the pages that had been partially assigned, not this one specifically.
Yes, that's for later.
Yeah, I don't think she had done this one specifically, Dawn.
Okay. So then that's okay. No problem. So is somebody willing to be the elderly member?
I think I fit that role.
Okay, Cliff, you'll be the elderly member. Now
You guys hang on a second. And everybody already has their role on these, and I'll read those off to you, okay?
Okay, very good.
Okay, so we have Sherry's the banker. Mike is the botanist.
Okay, that's a different thing, Sherry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this is a different exercise here.
Oh, this is a new one that we don't have?
Well, I did send it out to you, but it's on parking fees. It's about
Oh,
regular-
okay. I don't have that one.
Okay,
It's-
never mind. I'm going to show it on the screen.
Okay, sorry. I'm sorry.
That's all right. Well, we'll still have you be the banker. And
Okay.
will be the elderly member. Now, the environmentalist is kind of a firebrand. Is there any one of you who's got a willingness to be engaged? Anybody?
Jackie?
Great. Then we need a photographer.
I'll do that, Kevin.
Okay, and we need a teacher.
I can be a teacher.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. So all you have to do is read, but it doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt if you put a little body English into it and read your section with some enthusiasm. So let me call it up here. We'll make sure everybody can see it. Okay, so can everybody see this?
Mhm.
Parking fees practice script. Is it big enough?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll be the chair, the mayor. There's continuing pressure on our parking spaces in the downtown areas of the city of Dinopolis. The staff has reviewed the matter carefully. As you know, our current rate is $2 per hour. The staff recommends that the new fee be set at $20 per hour. Does anyone care to make that motion?
I move that parking fees be set at $20 per hour.
Second,
Very well, it's been moved and seconded that the parking fee be set at $20 per hour. We will now have discussion on the motion. Environmentalist, as the maker of the motion, you have the right to speak first.
Well, I'm a believer in public transportation myself. I think that this increase will lessen congestion and also force more people to take buses or walk. It's a good idea for the environment and for our city.
Further discussion, the chair recognizes the elderly member.
I think this is a terrible idea. We've just learned that we have $10 million surplus. Why would we increase parking fees and burden our residents this way?
Do you know that the parking fees in most cities of the league are $15 per hour? We are so far below the market that it's ridiculous.
Well, that's not a reason to go crazy and lay this burden on our residents. Many elderly dinosaurs are really feeling this pinch. Our current tough economic times have hit them hard.
There's no point being an old softy and begging for sympathy for the down and out. If they had an ounce of gumption, they would have saved up for their old age.
What a hard-hearted comment. Someday you might be old and wrinkled and poor yourself. You have no compassion.
All I have to say to you about this is nonsense, applesauce, and balderdash.
Point of order.
State your point.
These members are monopolizing this discussion. Under Robert's rules, no one can speak a second time until everyone who wishes to do so has spoken once.
The point is well taken. Members must speak in turn. Thank you, banker. Further discussion?
this is likely to put a crimp on the vitality of our downtown. As business owner, I'm really concerned about this. I speak against the motion.
I see those arguments, but I think we have to be prudent. I guess on balance, I'm in favor of this proposal.
Honestly, I think you dinosaurs are just living in the past. We ought to be preparing to have driverless cars, not raising the rates for our parking lots. You're just a bunch of has-beens. Cliff, you've got to unmute.
Point of order, Chair.
State your point.
That's an insulting remark. According to Robert's Rule of Order, all of us are obliged to speak with the courtesy and respect, including the chair.
Oh, the point is well taken. The chair apologizes for getting carried away. Is there further discussion?
In my opinion, this council is clueless. We have our heads stuck in the concrete. Given the way the stock market is trending, our surplus could just disappear. I hope everyone will agree to raise those rates.
You know, I've heard better discussions in my daughter's kindergarten class. It's clear that we don't have the sharpest knives in the kitchen drawer here.
Point of order.
State your point.
The members are insulting all of us by those remarks.
The chair will rule that the comments are indeed insulting. Members will kindly refrain from such improper statements.
I have to say, I don't think all of these rules are a good idea. They are keeping us from expressing our true opinion. You are out of date, dinosaur yourself, Chair.
The chair will rule that the words out of date dinosaur are insulting and may not be used.
Appeal.
Second.
Very well, the ruling of the chair has been appealed and seconded, so the members will decide. The chair has ruled that the words out of date dinosaur are insulting. All those who believe that this ruling should be sustained, please say aye.
Aye.
All those who believe that the ruling should not be sustained, please say no.
No.
The ayes have it, the motion passes, and the ruling of the chair is sustained. Members may not use this term. Further discussion? Photographer?
Oh, sorry. If we do this, the residents are likely to come and throw eggs at our houses, or even worse. I'm dead against it.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll take the vote. All those in favor of raising the parking fees to $20 per hour, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say no.
No.
The ayes have it, the motion passes, and we will raise the parking fees to $20 per hour. So thank you all for exercising your acting chops. Now, a discussion like that should never happen in your council meetings, and I'm sure that it never does. But just in case, let's look at this principle. This is called the principle of equality. All members have equal rights, privileges, and obligations. Very easy to say, but not so easy to carry out in real life. And so there's an important rule here that discussion in council and committee meetings is not a conversation. It's a debate, and it has its own rules. And this is the first of our 4 fundamental guidelines. No one may speak a second time until everyone who wishes to do so has spoken once. In fact, it's so important, I'm going to give it to you in red. No one may speak a second time until everyone who wishes to do so has spoken once. And this is just critical, but for some reason we don't do it. I think it's because councils and committees tend to discuss their affairs in conversational mode. And in conversations, dominant people tend to dominate and agreeable people tend to let them. You must have a structure to make sure that everyone has an equal chance to speak. And this is both fair and efficient. So if that's not happening, as we saw, a member can raise a point of order. So point of order in our Jurassic Parliament system is represented by a flying dinosaur, a pterodactyl. We have a motion that we're discussing, a main motion, and the pterodactyl just flies over the head of the motion and the chair takes care of it. The chair bats it out of the sky. It's got to be dealt with immediately. So when another member breaks one of the rules, a member may make a point of order, and then the chair issues a ruling on the point. Now, the chair has to know how to do this. I heard of one council where when somebody made a point of order, the chair said, I agree. Well, that's not it. You have to issue a ruling. So according to Robert's rules, point of order can be made only by a member, but we recommend that staff be authorized to do so also, key staff. The public may not raise a point of order. If you have somebody, when we're back in person, standing up in the audience and saying point of order, they are out of order. 2 very important things to know. You actually may interrupt a speaker if necessary. We don't recommend doing it often, but you can. And it must be timely. You have to make the point of order at the time of the offense. If you wait, it will be too late. So let's have an example of a point of order. I'm just going to make sure that I got the audio correct. Okay, so let me know if you can't hear this.
Point of order.
State your point.
That comment breaks our rules of decorum.
The point is well taken. Members may not use this term. So did that come through? Could you hear that well enough?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to play it just one more time.
Point of order.
State your point.
That comment breaks our rules of decorum.
The point is well taken. Members may not use this term. So you see, it's really very simple. The member says point of order. The chair replies, state your point. The member explains, and then the chair issues the ruling. It's well taken or it's not well taken. So notice that the chair is using the third person to keep things neutral and lessen conflict. You don't want to say you're out of order or you made a mistake, because that immediately personalizes things and introduces a tough emotional element. And when in doubt, ask the group. The chair can always ask the group to decide if a point of order is correct or not. Now, here's an example. Somebody uses the word malarkey and somebody else protests. The chair is uncertain about the word malarkey. The chair will ask the council to decide this matter. All those who believe that the word malarkey is insulting, please say aye. Those who agree, say aye. All those who believe that the word malarkey is not insulting, please say no. And those opposed, say no. The ayes have it and the word malarkey may not be used, or the noes have it and the word malarkey is acceptable. Now, what I find is that people don't tend to think of this. They don't tend to think of turning to the group because we're so aware of the authority that we have when we're running the meeting. But this is a great and a useful tool because it enables you to get out of the kitchen. If you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen. So the chair can turn to the group for other matters as well. Here's another example. The chair believes that remarks about UFOs landing at our city airfield are not germane and will ask the council to decide whether the council member may continue speaking on this topic. All those who believe that the council member may continue speaking, please say aye. Aye. All those who believe that the council member may not continue, please say no. No. The ayes have it and the council member may continue speaking, or the noes have it and the council member will cease from speaking. Our next speaker is. So there are a lot of circumstances where it's really handy to turn to the group to decide and take the pressure off the chair. What is the role of the chair? It is the duty of the presiding officer to enforce the rules relating to debate and those relating to order and decorum within the assembly. So the chair doesn't have to say point of order. The chair already has the duty of maintaining order and decorum. So the chair just needs to take appropriate action. Now, what if something like this happens?
The members are just going around in circles and wasting time with this discussion.
Point of order. The chair must follow the same rules as the rest of us.
Oh, the point is well taken. The chair apologizes for getting carried away.
So you saw that in the little script that we did about parking fees. If the chair breaks one of the rules, a member may raise a point of order, and then the chair issues a ruling on their own behavior, which seems totally weird, but that's the way the system works. Now, I want to mention a pitfall. Sometimes I train cities and immediately the members weaponize point of order and they start throwing points of order at each other like little darts. You may interrupt to make a point of order, and sometimes you have to, but usually it's not necessary to interrupt and you should hold back. And I think that usually it's best not to call a point of order for germaneness, for relevance. Now, obviously, if somebody is talking about their honeymoon in Peru, that's not going to be relevant, but people can have differing opinions about which points are relevant to their discussion. So sometimes it's hard in online meetings to catch the chair's attention for a point of order. And so one handy dandy tool is to have a piece of paper and just hold it up, point of order. And that way you can get the chair's attention. Or maybe in your council, that's not an issue because you're a small group, but it can be problematic because you can interrupt. Now, once the chair has ruled on a point of order, the only allowable form of discussion is to appeal the ruling. So we think that appeal is the most important motion in all of Robert's rules and the least known. A lot of times people just don't even know about it. The chair enforces order and decorum, but the group is the final authority. And any two members can appeal a ruling of the chair. One member appeals and another member seconds it. Now, there is an exception. If the ruling is a matter on which there cannot be two reasonable interpretations, the ruling cannot be appealed. So let's have an example of that.
The port was a cesspool of corruption.
Point of order.
State your point.
That comment breaks our rules of decorum.
The point is well taken. Members may not use this term.
Appeal.
Second.
Very well, the ruling of the chair has been appealed and seconded. The members will decide the matter. The question is whether the chair's ruling that the words cesspool of corruption break our rules of decorum should be sustained. All those who believe it should be sustained, please say aye. All those who believe it should not be sustained, please say no. In this instance, the members voted no, so the ruling of the chair was not sustained. I've put this unhappy figure in just for fun, but in fact, if you lose an appeal, it's better to maintain a neutral face. Try to give the impression that you don't care.
So this is how you process the appeal. A member makes the appeal, somebody says second, the chair says the chair's ruling has been appealed and the members will decide. All those who believe the ruling should be sustained, please say aye. All those who believe it should not be sustained, please say no. So one thing that's a little bit funny about this is that the question is the chair's ruling stands until it's overturned. So you're asking people, shall the decision of the chair be sustained? It feels like it should be the other way. So if you vote aye, you're supporting the chair. And if you vote no, then you're supporting the person making the appeal. So it's kind of confusing. It takes a negative vote for the appeal to win. A majority vote in favor of sustaining the chair's ruling or a tie means that the chair's ruling stands. And the chair gets to vote on the appeal. So point of order is made by one member, but an appeal needs a second. Point of order and appeal are processed immediately. No other business can take place until they're dealt with. And points of order and appeals don't count against a member's turn to speak in debate. They're separate. Point of order cannot be debated, and appeals pertaining to language, decorum, and the order of business cannot be debated. I think that's great. I think it's really wonderful that we can't argue about whether malarkey is insulting or not. And when an appeal can be debated, the process is different from anything else in Robert's rules. So we believe that point of order and appeal are the heart of democracy. And we will send this paper to you so that you'll have those tools at your full disposal. So now let's look at briefly at how to do this. So we have 4 guidelines that we recommend. And you're probably doing them anyway, but just in case, I want to quickly run through them. One is seek recognition before speaking. No one may speak a second time till everyone who wishes to do so has spoken once. No interrupting and no sidebar conversations. So members must seek recognition from the presider before speaking. This is just critical. I'm going to give it to you in red again. I've been working with a port in our city, not your port, where one of the members keeps arguing back and interrupting all the time. And it's just disastrous. It's got to be enforced. So you raise your hand and you wait to speak until the presider calls your name, nods at you, or gives some other sign that you have permission to speak. Online, you can use the raise hand feature or raise your physical hand. Kevin, did you have a question?
I don't think you're sharing your screen.
Oh, no. Oh, I must be sharing the wrong thing, probably. I'm so sorry. Thank you for calling me on that. Is that better?
Yes, thank you.
Call me sooner next time. I'm sorry, I don't want these pearls of wisdom to be disappearing into the ether. Okay, so when you have not been recognized, you have a duty to remain silent. The exception is a point of order, but that's what Robert says. And here's this wonderful paper, Rights and Responsibilities of the Member, that I will be sending to you that goes into all of this in a lot of detail. So how are you going to do this? Well, the chair can keep track of who has spoken and who wishes to speak using a chart. You can empower the vice chair to do this. It's good training for them. Or you can use the round robin. So in the round robin, the chair goes around the table asking each person in turn for their opinion. People may pass. It's important to have a pencil in hand to jot down points or questions for when your turn arrives. And the chair must wait their turn also. Can't, sometimes you see the chair answering each person back, and that's not fair. And this also applies to questions and answers. Don't let any 2 people hijack the meeting. Sometimes you see a staff person and a council member talking to each other back and forth for 15 minutes, and that should not be allowed. Give them a little chance and then go on to the next person. So here's an example of a speaking chart. which you're free to adapt if you wish to. It makes things a lot easier. You put people's names down the side, and then you just check off each person as they speak. And it really helps keep track of who's spoken and who is yet waiting to speak. Now, when a member has the floor, they have the right to speak until they've completed their comments. Members may not interrupt each other. And I think it's one of the good things about Zoom meetings is that we have less of that. We have less interruption. The chair may interrupt members when necessary to bring them to order. Not because they know more than the member does, but if there's a real violation, then they may interrupt. And members may interrupt to make a point of order when it's essential. So no sidebars or texting, no whispering, no posting on social media during meetings. All those things are just disastrous for the well-being of your council. Now, I want to say that structuring discussion in the ways I'm suggesting can be frustrating. Council members sometimes say, I wish we could just hash it out and have a free-form discussion. But the Open Meetings Act and the press of time mean that usually this won't serve your council well. But sometimes there is benefit in the conversational style or informal discussion. You know, it can provide a sparky flow of ideas that can be beneficial, could be useful at committee of the whole or study sessions. I just beg of you, please don't make the conversational style your ordinary or default style of discussion. So any questions on that before we go on to motions and amendments? Clifford, you have to unmute.
Back when we're taking turns on the round robin, or it says that a member may pass
Right.
when they're called upon. Does that take, is that their turn?
No, if they pass, then you should call on them at the end of the round and ask if they have anything further to say.
Yeah, because sometimes you might have still organizing your thoughts when, I mean, if you Robin and you always go by position number, position 7 always has more time to think things out than position 1.
Yes, well, we recommend not going by position number. We recommend that on the first round, you'd start with Garcia, Jackson, Juma Lee. And on the next round, you'd start with Jackson, Juma Lee. And on the next round, you'd start with Juma Lee Patel, that you'd rotate it in order to, because that is called the order effect, where people who speak earlier sometimes have an undue influence. So both those points are great, Cliff, and I will in fact incorporate them into future trainings. Thank you. Thank you for mentioning those. Any other questions or thoughts? Yes, Russell.
How often do you do round robin or any sort of selection of comments? How frequent?
So this is entirely up to you. Robert's rule says that for large groups, large boards, each member of a body can speak twice on each subject, but there's no such limitation for small boards. So what we recommend is you do one round robin, and then the chair consents if we need another round robin, or if just a few people have a comment. And it's really up to you. You can speak as many times as people have patience for. Any other questions? Those are great questions, both of you. All right, well, let's look at motions and amendments. So in our Jurassic Parliament system, a Tyrannosaurus Rex stands for a main motion. So for public bodies, a main motion is the usual and customary way to start the action of discussion and decision makings. Sometimes you have the draft motion as an agenda bill. Sometimes you make the motion during the meeting. And of course, it's only a draft as long as it's in the agenda bill. It only becomes your subject when somebody moves it, when somebody moves the motion. So we recommend this sequence. The staff presents a proposal in writing and answers any questions. The motion is moved and seconded. The members discuss the motion and may amend it. That's when amendments can come in. And then the members vote on the motion. Now, I will say that I took a look at one of your recent meetings where a member moved a motion with 2 amendments initially. And I don't recommend that. I think it's better to move the motion as stated and then propose your amendments, because otherwise you run that risk of what happens, which is that people wishing to vote against the amendment defeat the entire motion. So this is the Robertian system of motions and amendments. It was perfectly legitimate to do that, but I think that as a practical matter, it probably works better to move the motion and then amend it afterwards. And of course, the person who makes the motion has the right to speak first. So if you move the motion, you could move an amendment right away if you wish. So a main motion should be in writing, if at all possible. I was actually at a meeting once where once the vote was taken, someone said, "What did we just approve?" And nobody knew because they hadn't written it down. It should be clear and unambiguous. Don't say, "I move what he just said," or "so moved." It should be phrased in the grammatical positive. I just had an inquiry this morning from a clerk who wanted to know at last night's meeting, someone moved not to approve an ordinance. Don't do that. Don't do that. You make the motion to approve the ordinance, and then if you don't want to approve it, you vote it down. The motion must comply with the bylaws and the procedural law of the land, and you can only have one main motion at a time. So if we're debating this main motion to raise the parking fees, and somebody else make another motion to do a study of traffic in Dinopolis, that one is out of order. It can't be considered. This is another one of our guidelines, of our fundamental guidelines, one thing at a time. Robert's Rules is very linear, and the chair and the members have to really insist on this. So how do you introduce a main motion? Just 3 little words. I move that. People sometimes get kind of wrapped around the axle with, "I would like to motion that," and "I would like to move that." You don't need to do that. Just say, "I move that." Now, the member has the responsibility of formulating the motion, and you don't want to mix up your ideas about the subject with the motion itself. Save those for debate. So somebody might say something like this: "Our employees are really under a lot of stress right now. They're worried about an asteroid striking the earth and wiping us all out. And I think that giving them pharmaceutical help would be great. Valium would make a big difference. They deserve our assistance." That's the way to drive your clerk crazy. Don't do that. Say, "I move that all employees will be issued a monthly supply of Valium without charge." Just state your motion in a nice, plain, simple way. And you can request a moment to write it down. May I have a few minutes to write this down? The chair can also request that the motion be written. And when we're back in person again, these 3-part motion forms are very handy. You write the motion down and the chair gets one, the clerk gets one, and the person who makes the motion gets one. So there are a lot of different solutions. You can write it on a cocktail napkin, but it should be written down. Now, to second the motion, you just call out second. You don't have to be recognized. It's okay to second a motion you disagree with if you want to explain why it's a bad idea. If there's no second, the chair says, "There being no second, the motion will not be considered," and then moves immediately to the next item of business. Now, there are 8 steps to process a motion. And if you're willing, I suggest that you make a note of this, or if you've got it, if you printed it out, you can highlight it, because we're going to need this later when we do our motions practice. So first, the member makes the motion. Then another member seconds it. And then the chair states the motion. Now, that is often neglected, but it's really important. It's really important for the chair to state the motion for a couple of reasons. First, the way the chair states the motion is the actual text of the motion. Sometimes chairs have a tendency to kind of improve a motion. They put some body English on it. Well, if they improve it and it's not what you intended, you have to speak up and say, "Chair, that's not what my motion was," and give them the correct verbiage. That's the first reason. The second reason is that once the motion has been made, seconded, and stated by the chair, it belongs to everybody. It doesn't belong to the maker and seconder anymore. So these are both really important. Then in step 4, the members debate and/or amend the motion. In step 5, the chair restates the motion and calls for the vote. And again, on the meeting that I observed, that didn't happen. And I think it helps clarify things. You really want to say that motion again. You start to feel like a football announcer, a baseball announcer repeating yourself over and over again, but you need to do it. Then the members vote on the motion. The chair states the results of the vote, whether the motion passes or fails, and what happens next as a result of the vote. And then the chair states the next item of business. So these 8 steps are really, really important. They are just critical to how we're going to be making a motion. And I'm going to point out to you a parallel. When you come up to a traffic stop, you don't have to think about whether to turn right or left or whether to accelerate or whether to brake. You read that signal, that red, green, yellow signal. So these steps should be ingrained in you. You should all know these steps so that you know whether the chair is actually following them or not. So when it seems that discussion is finished, the chair asks, is there any further discussion or are you ready to vote? And if no one speaks up, then you take the vote. Those are kind of rhetorical questions. The chair repeats the motion. The chair says, all those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The chair announces the results of the vote and whether the motion passes or fails and what will happen next as a result of the vote. And then the chair announces the next item of business. The ayes have it, the motion passes, and we will issue all employees a monthly supply of Valium without charge, or the noes have it, the motion fails, and we will not move forward with this proposal. Now I'm going to pause my share for just a moment here. So I seem to have done something a little odd in this. Let me look here. No, I think it's all okay. All is well. All right. Let me share it again. Okay, so is that clear now? We on the voting slide?
Yes.
All right. So we strongly recommend that you don't use polls or chat for voting online. And MRSC recommends that you conduct online meetings as if they were oral only. So a roll call vote may be best for transparency and to avoid any confusion. Now, up until the chair announces the vote, you may change it. You may change your vote. After the chair has announced the vote, you may change it only with the unanimous consent of the body. And after the council has gone on to other business, your vote cannot be changed according to Robert's rules. Now, of course, there are other motions that you can undertake, but with regard to that immediate motion, that's your only chance, is right after the chair announces the result. You want to check your requirements for a vote to pass. I'm sure you're all familiar with this, but in the state of Washington, for instance, in order for an ordinance to pass on a 7-member council, there have to be 4 votes in favor. There was a case in the city of Lake Forest Park where there were 5 council members present, 3 voted in favor of the ordinance and 2 against, and they announced that the motion had passed, but it had not passed because it takes 4 for absolute requirement. On a voice vote, the chair must call for the negative vote, even if it seems obvious that the motion is unanimous. Robert's rule says that to abstain is to do nothing and that the chair should not call for abstentions. But local government bodies generally will call for abstentions, and that is fine. If you abstain, it means that you aren't taking any position on the matter. Of course, you must abstain if you have a conflict of interests. And some cities have a rule that an abstention is counted as a yes vote or as a no vote, and we don't recommend this. Determining whether you have a conflict of interest is sometimes complicated. For example, under Robert's rules, a person may vote on something that affects a class of persons of which they are a member, but city rules might be different. So you want to consult your attorney before the meeting so they can determine the correct situation. If you have a conflict of interest, you say, I recuse myself from this decision because of my conflict of interest. Recusal is a special form of abstaining, and you then leave the room and don't take part in the discussion or vote. So MRSC has lots more information on this. Now let's talk about amendments, which in Jurassic Parliament are represented by Dimetrodon. You amend a motion to improve it, unless you're the US Congress, but we're not going to go there. The amendment must be germane, which means relevant, and anyone may move to amend, even the person who made the motion. You might look kind of foolish if you make a motion and propose an amendment 3 minutes later, but there's no prohibition against it. So here's our Dimetrodon. So we've got our main motion offering all employees Valium, and then we've got Dimetrodon. I move that we amend the motion by adding the words after receiving a psychiatric evaluation. So if it's adopted, the motion will read, all employees will be issued a monthly supply of Valium without charge after receiving a psychiatric evaluation. So there are 4 different ways to amend, and we're not going to go into detail on this tonight, but you should at least know them. You can add or insert words. You can strike out words. You can strike out words and insert words in their place, or you can substitute, which is tricky. We say, don't try this at home. So the amendment is processed using those same 8 steps that we just saw for a main motion. Very handy, conservation of energy. The challenge is, and I know you know this, we vote on amendments before we vote on the main motion in order to make the main motion as good as possible, to perfect the motion. So it's kind of weird because the amendment blocks the main motion. We can't do anything with this guy until we've solved this guy. So if we vote to adopt this amendment, then it becomes a part of the main motion, and we have what's called an amended main motion. Or if we vote on this amendment and we vote it down, then we toss it and we're back to our main motion. So this again is a little bit counterintuitive. Once the fate of the amendment has been decided, debate continues on the main motion. And don't forget to vote on the main motion as amended. Once you've dealt with one amendment, you may have others, provided that they apply to a different aspect of the main motion. For instance, we could amend our main motion to say, to start in 2022. That would be fine. And again, we discuss it, vote on it, and if it's adopted, it becomes a part of the main motion. It takes special actions, reconsideration, to go back and change something we've already amended. After all amendments have been processed, the body still must vote on the amended main motion. Now, I just want to mention friendly amendment. Do you ever have friendly amendments in your council meeting? Does anybody ever say friendly amendment? Well, it's probably just as well if you don't, but what sometimes happens is someone says, may I offer a friendly amendment? And the chair turns to the maker of the motion to ask if they will accept it. That's wrong. That's very undemocratic. You handle it the same as any other amendment. You say, is there a second? And you just march right ahead, because once the motion has been stated by the chair, the maker and seconder have the same rights as any other member. So any questions before we take our little break? Any questions on motions and amendments? Clear as mud? I think you're all using them fine, so you probably don't need very much here. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to take a 5-minute break. It's called a stand at ease, where it's not a formal recess, but it's a chance to stretch or get a glass of water. And I will see you back at 6:31. See you back at 6:31. That we amend the motion. So now we're not going to discuss this anymore. We're going to discuss relaxing spa services. Mr. Spa Manager, do you care to speak to your motion? Just make something up.
Our spas could really benefit from this initiative, and given the stress of these tough economic times, spas are vital to our health.
Thank you. Donald, did you have your hand up? No? Okay. Does anyone else care to speak to this amendment? So anybody else care to speak? Are you ready for the vote then? So the question is to amend the main motion by adding the words to spend half on the building and half on providing spa services to our residents. All those in favor, please say aye. You have to unmute now, everybody. Or yeah, just raise your hand. That'll be better. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you. Hands down. All those opposed? Hands down. So we have a tie here, 4 in favor and 4 opposed. So the chair will vote in that case to break a tie. And so she votes against. So the motion fails. So we're back now to discussion on the main motion. Does anyone else have any further comment to make or amendment? Russell.
I moved that we amend, I'm the bungee jumper. I move that we amend the motion by adding the words and support the Bungee Jumpers Club by announcing all their events on our community bulletin board.
So the chair will rule that the proposed amendment is not germane to the main motion to build a performing arts center, and therefore it cannot be taken up. Monica? I thought Monica raised her hand, but maybe I'm wrong.
Sorry, I didn't unmute. I'm the chocolate maker. In my opinion, chocolate is a much better way to lift people's spirits than art performances.
So you speak against the motion?
Yes.
Thank you. Further discussion? So it seems like we're ready to vote. No, Roger.
Yes, this is a splendid idea, and I look forward to patronizing the region's best opera performers.
I would guess you might be the opera fan.
Yes.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Yes, Cliff.
I'm the museum director. I think performing arts live for the moment, but what we really need is a museum that gives the immortality to the dinosaurs.
So you speak against the motion.
Yes.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? All right, we'll take the vote. So the motion is to use to build a performing arts center at a cost not to exceed $10 million. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. Thank you. Hands down. All those opposed, please raise your right hand. It's a tie again. What a tough situation. So in this case, the chair will vote in favor. So the motion passes and we will build a performing arts center. Now, yes, Jackie.
What happened to the discussion of Russ's suggestion for the bungee jumping, like advertising? Was that an amendment?
Well, he wanted to amend the main motion, but the chair ruled that the amendment was not relevant.
Okay.
See, the earlier amendment we had was about using the money. So in the chair's opinion, it was legitimate. But this was an amendment about advertising bungee jumping, which in the chair's view anyway, had nothing to do with building a performing arts center.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, now, yes, Michael.
This might be jumping ahead a little bit, but because the situation came up here, so your decision,
Right.
Can a member appeal that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I was kind of waiting to see if he might try. Yeah. A member could say appeal, and then if there's a second, then the group will decide whether bungee jumping is relevant to building a performing arts center. Great question. Thank you. Now, so I'm going to invite one of you to make a motion. You can make the one that's written on your paper, or you can pick a different role and make a motion. Again, we're totally free form here. You can say whatever and you can do whatever. You don't have to second anything. You don't have to vote for or against. Does any member care to make a motion? Jackie,
I move that we provide Valium without charge to every resident dinosaur suffering from stress.
is there a second?
I second.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded that we provide Valium without charge to every resident dinosaur suffering from stress. Do you care to speak to your motion?
Yes, thank you. In these tough economic times, many dinosaurs are suffering from anxiety and stress. Valium would make them calmer.
Thank you. Further discussion on the motion? Yes, Don. Tell
I
us
was
what-
just wondering if we could also provide something to counteract the effects of Valium. Maybe we could prescribe some methamphetamine to bring them up from their downs.
And what role are you playing, Don? Are you just generally speaking?
Doper, local doper.
Okay. So would you like to offer an amendment?
Yes, I would like to offer an amendment.
Okay, so what would your amendment be? And
My
all-
amendment would be to provide equal amounts of methamphetamine to our dino buddies to counteract a similar amount or same amount of Valium that they're receiving to calm themselves down.
Very well. Is there a second? I think it's going to go, the motion is going to go nowhere. Okay, I'm glad to hear that since the public is watching this training. Okay, further discussion on the motion. We've got the motion here to provide Valium. Anybody want to amend it or say anything further? All right, so we'll take the vote. So the motion is that we provide a Valium to all resident dinosaurs who are suffering from stress. Is there, all those in favor, please raise your right hand. Thank you. All those opposed, please raise your right hand. Thank you. Hands down. So we had 4 in favor and 6 opposed. So the motion fails and we're not going to provide Valium to residents who are under stress. All right, let's try one more. Russell.
So I have a question. If someone doesn't vote, do you ask them for their vote, or do you just assume it's a yes or a no, or how do you process? Do you ask them their stance? How do you do that?
So that was to do nothing is to abstain. And Robert says that to abstain, you don't ask, and that it's not counted. Now, a lot of city governments do count it because of conflict of interest possibilities. So there's a little bit of a difference between what Robert says and what practice is. But in general, under Robert, it's not counted one way or the other. And we don't agree with situations where a city code says it's counted as a yes vote or it's counted as a no vote. We think it should just be nothing. All right, so does anyone want to try being the chair? Cliff.
I have a follow-up on Russ's question.
Yes.
We have a practice, if not code, that when we abstain, we state the reason to. Is that common practice, recommended, pro or con?
So I don't recommend it. I think personally that it's fine to just let people abstain, but if you have a conflict of interest, you should explain it. You should say so, right, Rob? I mean, if you want to speak to that?
So we actually have a provision in our city code that specifies if and when a council member abstains, the council member needs to state on the record the reason why. It's not something that I created or probably that anybody here created, but that's currently our law.
But it's not, may a council member abstain for reasons other than conflict of interest?
Sure. I don't know that there's a limitation on circumstances in which one could abstain. So one could abstain for many reasons.
Okay, so that's good to know. So obviously your law is controlling. And so if that's what it says, then you must do that. Some cities say that you may not abstain. that you have to vote yes or no unless you have a conflict of interest. So I'm glad you don't have that. I don't like that. Kevin?
Well, so I thought that was if there was a conflict, that was a recuse. I want to be recused from the,
Right?
so that's different than abstain, or is it the same?
Well, recusal is a special form of abstaining. Abstain under Robert's rules just means do nothing.
Right.
Recusal means do nothing because there's a conflict of interest.
So if we have a conflict, then it's actually a recusal.
Yes.
Okay, thank
But
you.
it's just jargon. I mean, it's the same thing. Rob, did you want to say anything more on that?
So it's Selah Municipal Code 1.06.250, voting dash abstention. In the event a member abstains from voting, that member shall announce his or her intention to abstain and reason for abstaining. An abstention shall not affect the presence of a quorum. An abstention shall not be considered as either a vote for or against the matter. And that looks like that's been in our code via an ordinance since 1989.
Could you give me that reference again, Rob, if you don't mind?
1.06.250.
Thank you. I'm working on a paper on voting and quorum questions. So it's always interesting to see how different jurisdictions handle it. Yes, Cliff.
Back to Russ's original question, then, if we have a voice vote and the chair recognizes that someone did not cast a vote, then under our code, would it be appropriate that the chair asks at that point?
Absolutely. Because they're required to. The abstaining member is required to give a reason.
Yes, what triggers the requirement to give a reason is just in the event a member abstains from voting. So if you're abstaining due to a actual or perceived conflict of interest, that would be your explanation. But I guess it's presumably possible somebody could abstain and then when they give their reason, state a different reason. Say, you know, I'm not comfortable voting on this, or I don't know which way I want to vote, so I'm not going to vote.
Well, we had that case, you know, with the Pierce County Council where they were considering separating out the health unit from the county. And one of the council members left the meeting because she said, I don't want to be involved with any decision like this. To me, that's just bizarre. That's, if you don't approve of this decision, then you should stay and fight for what you believe.
No.
It's also in our code that once our meeting starts, no member can depart the meeting unless given permission. I think it's by the chair, maybe it's by the entire body, but there is a permission that has to be granted.
Well, that's interesting to know too.
Yeah, again, I think almost all of this traces back to 1989. We're starting to, well, I'm starting to try and get our code updated in certain ways, but we'll see if we touch on that one.
Right, right. So any other questions about motions and amendments? Is it all as clear as mud? Yes, Roger.
Yes, we have a practice at least that we only do voice votes by name. So everyone, it's four people voting. It's you're identified by name how you vote, and then the chair announces what the result was. But everyone knows who that how each council person voted. You only have three choices in my view on that. You vote in favor, you vote against, or you abstain.
So do you take all your votes by roll call?
Yes.
Just the resolutions and the ordinances.
Right.
We have a consent agenda, so of course that's not usually a roll call. That's just a voice vote.
Right.
Sometimes, since I've been on board about 1.5 years, we've done roll calls on, I guess I'll call them non-consent matters. Other times we've just done voice votes on non-consent matters.
So under Washington state law, any member can request a voice vote, a roll call vote, and you must do it. I mean, that's right there in the law. But
Right.
in addition, Jurassic Parliament is not in favor of taking a voice vote and then trying to write down how people voted by name, because that puts too much burden on the clerk. If you want to record it, which is fine, in your meeting, Ann, John, and Mary voted for, against, and for, we would be in favor of a roll call. And we see this sometimes. I see this on the Seattle City Council. The members say, all those in favor, aye, all those opposed say no. And the clerk is trying to scramble. Maybe she didn't hear it correctly, as to how each person voted. And that should not be. It should be perfectly clear. And particularly, of course, when we're online for transparency, it should be really clear how everybody votes.
Perhaps if I would say this, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, it would be your advice to use roll calls in essentially all scenarios other than the consent agenda.
Yes, I would say so. I would say so. Or maybe if you want to take a recess, that's fine.
Yeah. Yet, however, given that you have reviewed some of our minutes, and our minutes are, in your opinion, too detailed, and you would like us to use the action minutes, despite the fact that you advise that we use roll calls in general, you would then also still advise that our minutes just say passed or not passed, rather than saying council member so-and-so and so-and-so voted yes.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
Okay.
So a roll call vote must be recorded in the minutes by
Okay,
name.
good.
Must be recorded in the minutes by name. My concern has to do with all the discussion that's
right.
And action is not the only choice. There's another type of minutes called summary
minutes.
And those are fine too, in our view. And now obviously this is all you, it's all in your hands, but we believe that the kind of detail about who said what is a hampering to your work in your minutes, and that you'd be better off without it.
If we ever get in trouble, we'll make sure to sue you over it. So,
I'm only a parliamentarian, so I'm not
I
fortunate.
saw the disclaimer at the beginning of the slideshow.
Absolutely. No, it's all your call. And if a lot of, councils like to have it down there. They like to have it because they're dedicated and they work hard and they feel that their work should be recorded, but that's not the parliamentary point of view. So, okay. Any other questions on motions and amendments? We could do hours on this, but we don't have hours. So we're going to go right ahead and talk about who's in charge. So let me share my screen again. Make sure I get the right actual thing this time. There, who's in charge? So I just want to mention that Robert has different rules for small boards, up to about 12 people. In a small board, the chair may make motions, discuss, and vote unless the law, the regulations, or the bylaws say otherwise, which of course in Washington State they do for a strong mayor. So the situation is, in our view, that a strong mayor, although technically not a member of the council, may take part in discussion, provided that they do so with restraint. And they don't make motions, obviously, and they only vote in certain cases to break certain kinds of ties, which I'm sure you're all very familiar with. So we recommend that the chair exercise restraint by speaking and voting last, and certainly by refraining from making motions, which your mayor would not do in any case. So here's this paper, Small Board Rules Are Different, that I will send to you with the materials. I just want to mention that Robert's Rules of Order, although it's a terrible book, it's a good book to have. And if you get one with the spiral binding. You can only get that from the National Association of Parliamentarians. It's so much easier to work with because it lies flat on the page. And the Roberts people finally have broken down, and they've published this book, Robert's Rules in Brief. Nobody wants to read it either, but it's really a good book. And it also, you can get spiral bound. And this, you could read this in an evening or two, and it really gives you the essence of Robert's Rules. But it's like a signpost to the big book. You can't adopt this as your authority. So I want to describe two different types of organizations. One is shaped like a pyramid or a triangle. And at the top, you've got the boss. The boss is in charge of the organization, recruits people to do the work of the organization, and if they do it badly, fires them. So this is called an accountability hierarchy. And the reason is that there is rank in this organization. The lower members are have lower status than the higher members. Now, to me, that's okay as long as they use their status intelligently. You hope that the people higher up will listen to the people lower down, which they have a tendency not to do, but we need this for accountability. So this is a very common structure. Every corporation has a CEO, every general has an army, every school has a principal, and it's so widespread that we tend to think of it as the only form of organization, but it's not. There's a whole other type, which is called a voluntary association. Now, in a voluntary association, a group of people come together to achieve a common purpose, and they set up some guidelines for themselves, but the leader is a peer. The leader is an equal with the same status during the meeting as the other members. So to me, one of the biggest problems we have about leadership in this country is that when someone gets elected, mayor, president, chair, they tend to think that they're the boss, and other people start treating them as if they were the boss, which is not correct during the meetings. So each member has an equal right to speak and to try to persuade others to accept their view. During meetings, the chair controls the process so the group can make the decisions. And during meetings, the chair is the servant of the group and the group is the final authority. This is the most important thing I'm going to say today. During meetings, the chair is the servant of the group and the group is the final authority. So here's a paper on that. The chair is not in charge of your meeting, which I wrote as a kind of paradox, but I will be sending it to you. And you have both types of structure. The council forms a voluntary association, whereas the city manager and staff form an accountability hierarchy. So it's really important to keep those two different types separate in your mind. What is each person's individual authority? When you leave this Zoom meeting and walk out on the street, what authority do you have as an individual? Anybody want to tell me? Yes, that's right. Zero, zip, zilch, nothing. And this is a wonderful formula of it, I think. All members of a governing board share in a joint and collective authority, which exists and can be exercised only when the group is in session. This is a different authority than Robert, but I think it's an excellent formula that describes your authority, which is joint and collective. Now, what's your individual power? Legislation is the prerogative of the council. The mayor supports the council, but does not decide. But administration is the prerogative of the mayor, and the council may not interfere. So council members may not do the work of the city. Elected officials care deeply about their city. Sometimes they have special knowledge and expertise. They may make suggestions to the mayor, but they may not do the work of the city themselves. They can't cross that line between legislation and administration. So your duty as a council member, I should say mayor in here, sorry about that, is to debate and determine overall strategy, policy, and legislation for your city, and leave the details of operations to the mayor and staff. Now, what about if you oppose the decision? You remember that in ancient days, the king was the source of all earthly power and authority in our Western civilization, which he receives from God. It's the great chain of being, God, then the king, and then everybody else. And there are symbols of authority, the crown, the mace, and the dais. I love it that when you're sitting on your dais, you're actually using a symbol of authority and power. So in 1215, King John said to the peers, the law is in my mouth. The law is in my mouth. But they beat him down with the Magna Carta and they got him to concede. And then in 1595, Peter Wentworth, who was a member of Parliament, criticized Queen Elizabeth. And so she put him in the Tower. There was no parliamentary privilege then. Then after he was out the next year, he started to criticize her again, and his fellow parliamentarians put him in the Tower because they were so frightened of what she would do. So it was a very, very different situation. There was no point of personal privilege. If the monarch didn't like what you said, you were arrested or executed. And then in 1776, we abandoned the entire idea that authority flows from God to the king. Who does authority come from? It comes from we, the people. So that's the basic structure for your city council. We had the US Constitution, and that means that vigorous discussion on council motions is great. Express your views freely and don't hold back. But once the vote has been taken, things change. Once the vote has been taken, things change. It's okay to have different opinions. It's a strength, but we tend to identify with our own position. And when we're defeated, sometimes we take it personally. But at the end of the day, the body must unite behind its decision. It's a basic democratic principle that the decision of the majority voting at a properly called meeting is the decision of the body as a whole. And the minority must make it their decision as well. It's a terrible system. But I like Winston Churchill's quote when he famously said, "Democracy is the worst system of government in all the world, with the exception of those others that have been tried from time to time." So in a democracy, how we decide things is more important than what we decide. And when serving on a public body, members have a duty to uphold the decision of that body, even if they disagree with it. They may express their disagreement in public, but they may not attempt to undermine the decision. I just heard of a school district over on the Kitsap Peninsula where the school board passed a bond, and one of the members went to the city of Port Angeles and spoke to the city council to try to persuade them to pass a motion disapproving of the bond. That was a complete violation of his duty as a member of the board. He was trying to undermine the decision. Of course, you're free to try to persuade your colleagues to change it, but that's a different matter. We all want to be right. It's human nature to be unhappy when you oppose the decision, and our current culture places a strong premium on individuality. I invite you to commit yourself to a bigger principle than your own views, which is the essential principle of majority rule. And we just published today this article, Lost the Vote, Don't Sabotage the Council's Action, that goes into this. So I love this quote from Cornell Clayton: "The willingness to engage in honest debate and lose on issues you care deeply about reaffirms your commitment to common citizenship." And even more, Elias Canetti, "The ballot box is sacred because the alternative is blood." And I believe this is deeply true. You know, all across the world, we see situations where force and violence determine what happens, and not the power of the ballot box and the power of voting. My late husband and I lived in the Democratic Republic of the Congo some years ago, and now our Christmas cards come back, postal service suspended. There is almost no civil society in the Congo, schools, roads, hospitals. And I think that what you all are doing in your positions as elected officials or as staff is really a kind of a miracle. Local government is a miracle. You all are in your positions not because you paid bribes or you have a private army or you're related to the governor, but because of your commitment to your city. And I honor you for it. It's really a privilege to work with you, both elected officials and staff. And I thank you for that opportunity. So from the height of that public service announcement, we now get to descend to inappropriate remarks. But I think maybe before we do the inappropriate remarks, we'll do one more script. So let me stop my share here. Call this up. The city of Selah. Here we go. So I did not send this to you in advance, but I'm going to share it now. It's called Weed Control at City Hall. And I'm going to invite anybody who would like to take the roles. Maybe Madam Mayor, you'd like to be the chair.
Okay,
Would you do that for me?
I'm ready.
All right. And then we need a banker, a botanist. Now, maybe this was the one that you did. I don't know if I sent you this. Anyway, we need a banker, a botanist, a dancer, a facilities committee chair, and a football coach. Who will be which?
This is Kevin. I'll be the football coach.
Okay.
Well, Mike, have the botanist.
Michael will be the botanist.
This is Suzanne, and I'll be the facilities committee chair.
Very good.
This is Russ, and I'll be the dancer.
Very good. So we
I was hoping Kevin would take that.
So what's that?
I said I was hoping Kevin would take that.
Well, he's already taken the football coach. We need a banker.
The dancer.
We need a banker.
Okay,
Who will do that? Roger?
Roger.
Okay, good. Banker. So Kevin is the football coach. Michael is the botanist. Suzanne is the facilities committee chair. Russ is the dancer, and Roger is the banker. So I suggest you all unmute, and Sherry's going to be the chair, the mayor. So unmute, and again, it's just straight reading. You don't have to do anything fancy, except if you want to make it interesting, you're certainly free to. Can you see it nicely, everybody? Okay, Sherry, go take it away.
As council members know, when we built our new city hall 10 years ago, it was landscaped according to green principles. We use only the latest energy efficient tools and methods. However, despite our best efforts, the blackberries and the English ivy have gotten out of hand. The staff is recommending that we hire a herd of goats from Rent-A-Goat in order to trim the grounds. Does any member care to make that motion?
I move that the staff be directed to hire a herd of goats from Rent-A-Goat in order to trim the grounds.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that the staff be directed to hire a herd of goats from Rent-A-Goat in order to trim the grounds. Do you care to speak on the motion?
Yes, this is a very sensible, environmentally friendly way to take care of overgrowth. I know that in Washington State, they use goats all the time to trim their county parks.
I think that this is a silly way to tackle the problem. I'm in favor of slash and burn myself. I move that we apply industrial strength plant killer to destroy the blackberries and the ivy, root and branch.
Members are reminded that under Robert's Rules of Orders, only one main motion can be considered at a time. We are discussing the proposal to hire a herd of goats, and no other main motion can be made.
I can't believe that you said that. How can anybody be in favor of slash and burn? Have you no consideration for the well-being of our planet? You're just an out and out fossil.
Well, in my opinion, your crazy environmental ideas are just as bad. We're going to be sorry we ever got the smelly goat business.
Point of order, Chair.
State your point.
Under Robert's Rules of Orders, no one may speak a second time until everyone who wishes to do so has spoken once. These members are monopolizing the conversation and also are using insulting language to each other.
The point is well taken. We need to hear from everyone in turn. All discussion must be respectful. Who else would like to speak?
I predicted that all the green nonsense was going to give us problems down the line. And look where we are now. I move that we add the words at a maximum cost of $12,000 per year.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that we amend the motion by adding the words at a maximum cost of $12,000 per year.
Chair, I'm confused. Does this mean that we've already decided in favor of the goats?
No, the way the system of motion works, a member makes a proposal, a main motion, then other members can move to amend or change the main motion in order to improve it. We will discuss and vote on the amendment, and then we will take up the main motion again. If the amendment passes, we'll consider the motion as amended. If it fails, we will return to the original main motion.
Amending the motion in order to improve it, do they follow that rule in US Congress?
All discussion must be limited to the topic at hand. Banker, do you care to speak to your amendment?
As far as I'm concerned, the tree huggers are making it impossible to get anything done. Goats will be expensive to maintain. I've heard stories of them costing tens of thousands of dollars. We could lose our shirts with this. We need to set some financial limits.
Any further discussion?
It's just common prudence to protect yourself with a clause like this. I urge my colleagues to vote in favor.
Our grounds are pretty big, but I think that $1,000 a month ought to be enough to keep them in good shape. I'm in favor.
In my view, that's not enough money. I doubt that we can get that service, the service we need for that amount. I speak against the amendment.
Is there any further discussion on the amendment? Hearing none, we'll take the vote on the motion to amend. If the amendment passes, the motion will read that the staff will be directed to hire a herd of goats from Rent-A-Goat in order to trim the grounds at a maximum cost of $12,000 per year. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
I,
All those opposed, please say no.
No,
The ayes have it, the motion passes, and the main motion is amended. We will now resume discussion on the main motion as amended.
I'm a nature lover, and I think that this is a brilliant solution. I'm all for it.
It doesn't seem like such a big deal to me. I like landscaping that has a rough and unfinished look. It's less artificial.
Natural look is one thing, but I could hardly get out of my car today because of the blackberry bushes.
I'm not so sure about this. I think we're being kind of hasty here. If you studied the zodiac, you'd know that the sun is in the house of Taurus these days. Here's what my horoscope said this morning. You need to reach a decision organically. There's no way for you to rush it.
Point of order, Chair.
State your point.
The last speaker's remarks do not appear to be germane to the issue we're discussing.
The point is well taken. Members are reminded that under Robert's Rules of Order, discussion must be relevant to the topic at hand.
Well, I think that we can't really address this unless we look at the governor's report on climate change. I was reading it the other day and I was really impressed with the official recommendations.
Point of order, Chair.
State your point.
I believe that the governor's report on climate change is not germane to our discussion right now.
The chair will ask if the council to decide this question. All those who believe that the governor's report on climate change is germane to our discussion right now, please say aye.
Aye.
All those who believe that that it is not germane, please say no.
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 The noes have it. The report is not germane and we will not discuss it at this time.
I don't think we need to hire a herd of Rent-A-Goat to find the goats. A glance around the chamber should be enough. You're up, brother.
Point of order.
Dan,
State your point.
That is an insulting remark.
The point is well taken. Members will refrain from personal and insulting comments. Keep your discussions on topic, please.
it seems to me that goats are kind of smelly and messy. I'm worried that this is going to downgrade our professional image.
It seems to the chair that you're worrying too much about appearances. Can't you get down from your high horse and consider what's best for the planet?
Whoa, point of order.
State your point.
The chair is out of line here. Under Robert's rules, the chair has to follow the same rules as the rest of us and may not make personal remarks.
Oh, your point is well taken. The chair apologizes for getting carried away.
I think this is a great idea. I'm a Capricorn and the sign of the goat is an excellent omen for our city.
My opinion, anyone who supports this new idea is a bozo.
Point of order, Chair.
State your point.
The word bozo is an insult.
The chair will rule that the word bozo is an insult and may not be used.
Appeal?
Second.
Very well. The ruling of the chair has been appealed and seconded, so the group will decide. As you know, appeals pertaining to language and decorum cannot be debated. It is just a straight up or down vote. All those who believe that the ruling of the chair that bozo is an insult should be sustained, say aye.
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 All those who disagree, say no.
No.
Very well, the ayes have it, and the ruling of the chair is sustained. Members may not use the word bozo. Clerk, please be sure to record this in the minutes. Is there any further discussion on the motion as amended? Very well, we will take the vote. All those in favor of the motion that the staff be directed to hire a herd of goats from the Rent-A-Goat in order to trim the grounds at a maximum cost of $12,000 per year, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say no.
No.
The ayes have it and the motion passes, and staff will move ahead.
Great job. Great job. Thank you all. Thank you all. Okay, so that's a great intro for us to talk briefly about inappropriate remarks. So this is the last of our fundamental guidelines. Courtesy and respect are required. It's a basic principle of parliamentary procedure that debate must be germane, which means relevant to the topic at hand. Certain kinds of remarks are inappropriate because they're not relevant to the discussion. So courtesy and respect are required at all times. And there's 5 kinds of inappropriate remarks. Personal remarks about others, except for conflict of interest issues. Discourteous remarks, insulting language and attacks. Inflammatory language. Criticizing past actions of the group, with 2 exceptions. If the group as a whole is discussing something, you can criticize it. Or if you as a member are about to introduce a motion to rescind or amend something, you can discuss it. And then remarks that are not germane or relevant to the discussion. That's kind of the umbrella. That covers everything. So here's a paper I'll send you about inappropriate remarks on local government councils. During the meeting, council members have a duty to be polite to their colleagues, staff, and everyone else. It's part of their fiduciary duty of obedience to the goals of the organization. So what about if something like this happens?
You're only saying that because you're a banker.
That was a personal remark. And Robert says the measure, not the member, is the subject of debate. So the focus of our meeting is words on paper. Focus on the motions and not on the people who make the motions. And we recommend that council members take this approach outside the meeting also. Focus on actions taken and do not criticize colleagues outside the meeting. These are the 2 exceptions for criticizing past actions. And as far as germaneness, be vigilant but reasonable about this. The chair can call a member to order if remarks are not germane, or a member can call another member to order. So again, this is our same fundamental guideline, one thing at a time. So this is a useful language tip. Members will kindly keep their remarks strictly to the topic under discussion. Now, if any question arises as to whether a remark is appropriate or not, the chair rules subject to appeal. And as I hope you've been seeing throughout this evening, the chair may also turn immediately to the group to ask the members to decide, because ultimately it's the group's call. So here's our paper on that, how to be objective about subjective comments. Now, what about the deer in the headlights problem? You know, you hear something and you know it's off, but how are you going to quickly label it and respond? So we have a tool, which some of you may have seen, which we offer for purchase on our website, called the Wait cheat sheet. Wait, what should I say? It's laminated. I see Sherry's got one there. Great. And on the other side, it's got motions. So down the side are these big mistakes. And then across the top, there are 3 columns. One is for what to say if you're the chair. One is for what to say if you're a member speaking about another member. And one is for what to say if you're a member speaking about the chair. It's the only source I know for that kind of information. So I just want to mention 2 things. We don't like the idea that guidelines must be enforced. But all human organizations, even benign institutions like hospitals, schools, and retirement communities, ultimately depend on power enforcement for their success. So the power of the group extends to the power to sanction. And it's best if the city rules of procedure include specific steps to be taken when your guidelines are broken. If Robert's Rules is your authority, you have this power already. Don't do this lightly, obviously, and consult with your attorney before proceeding. So these are examples of actions that may merit sanction, which I'm not going to dwell on right now. And these are possible sanctions. And a paper sanctioning rogue board members. So one final thing on inappropriate remarks. We're speaking here about discussion within the council meetings, each of you speaking to each other. These prohibitions do not apply to the public when they are giving public comment. Attendees don't have the right to disrupt the meeting, but in general, the courts have found that mere words do not constitute disruption. And if a free speech issue comes to court, often the local government loses the case. So if things start to get hot in your community, you want to have an action plan. And don't dialogue. We think it's very important not to have back and forth dialogue with the public. Of course, you've got to have other channels to communicate. That's very important too. So I'll send you this guidelines for public comment in local government. So now I just want to mention the right kind of control. You must have knowledge of how this system works, a majority on your council in favor of civility and this system, and the personal moxie, chutzpah, energy and drive to put it all into practice. The chair serves as a benevolent dictator enforcing the rules the group has chosen. Individual members must seek recognition before speaking. So if someone speaks up without being recognized, the chair has to stop them. If someone speaks out of turn, the chair has to interrupt them. If someone makes insulting remarks, the chair has to cut them off. And members have a duty to obey the chair's directions. If they disagree, they can't argue back. What can they do? Anybody want to tell me?
Point of order.
Yep, point of order or appeal, as the case may be. So we don't use that word duty much nowadays, but I think of it as a commitment to the principles of democracy. And you're upholding that choice when you follow these principles. So I recommend that the chair should be like Napoleon, leading the troops through the Alps. You know, you've got to guide your members by stating the obvious. You as chair know more about the process than anybody else. You must repeat yourself and state the obvious to help bring everyone along. Keep things moving, be brisk, speak crisply. I heard recently these kind of comments. Well, I guess the agenda is adopted, or I'll kind of get a thumbs up from the board next week. Don't do that. Say the agenda is adopted. I will ask the board to vote next week. Be crisp. This is a tool, an agenda stand. I'm sure all you young people have just a second monitor, but for me, having this by my side here helps me keep track as I work my way through the meeting. I'll send you these language tips for meeting management. And I want to remind you that Robert says the chair should never get excited. So we don't ever want to have this famous photograph, which we all know from our wonderful city of Black Diamond, the grapple for the gavel. That's something we never want to have. Richard Rohr says, win-lose is the only game most of us understand. We have a constant unspoken need for domination and actually find no enjoyment in win-win situations. Now, I'm sure that's not true of you. I'm sure that you all are at a higher spiritual level. But as for me, if I'm in a fight, I want to win it. So if you feel yourself settling into combat mode, just try to back off a little and remember that it's not a fight. Serving on the council is not a fight. So I'm going to skip through these charming little discussions here because I'm running out of time. And I just want to talk about review and next steps. So you have this book, which you were kind enough to purchase. I hope you find it helpful. And I'm going to send you this Citizen's Guide to Effective Conduct of Public Meetings. This is not a Jurassic Parliament publication. It was done by a group of parliamentarians on a pro bono basis, but I think you may find it helpful. So I said after taking this training, you'd be able to describe how the authority of the chair is more important than any single individual, make motions and amendments, choose your board's discussion rules to improve efficiency, and make the personal commitment necessary to run effective meetings. So you know the purpose of your meetings under Robert's rules, and the meeting is not about your opinions. The focus of your meeting is words on paper, the motions that you pass. Don't focus on argument, focus on action. I suggest as council members that you don't try to convince your colleagues that you're right. Don't answer them back or question what they said. Don't argue with them. Just state your own position as clearly and effectively as you can. State your own position as clearly and effectively as you can. And once the vote has been taken, support the decision of the council. So I hope that this has been helpful. I said that I wanted to invigorate you. How do you feel? Do you feel invigorated? Has it been useful to go through these things? Good. Well, I hope that you'll keep in touch. I'd love to have you subscribe to our newsletter if you like. It's a monthly. And then we also have blog entries more or less weekly, including our new advice column, Dear Dinosaur. And I love parliamentary questions. So please write to me anytime if you have something that you would like to know more about. The spirit that I'm trying to offer here is not new to Robert. Henry Martin Robert didn't think of it. It's been around for a long time. So I'd like to share with you a quotation that comes from the 6th century before Christ. It comes from the Tao Te Ching, and it uses the Chinese word Dao, which means the nature of things or the way of things. And it goes like this. The best leader is one, the fact of whose existence is barely known. Next best is one who is loved and praised. Next best is one who is feared, and worst of all is one who is despised. If you fail to trust people, they will not prove to be trustworthy. Therefore, guide others by quietly relying on Tao, and when the work is done, the people will say, we did this ourselves. And that's my wish for you in the city of Selah. So that's my formal presentation, Madam Mayor. Is there any other questions or thoughts that people would like to share? I can't hear you, Sherry.
And I have one.
Yes.
As we are working our way and learning how to do this, in our next council meeting, is it proper to bring up, trying to figure out if we're following these rules in the middle of the meeting?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And there's actually a formal name for it, if you like, called point of parliamentary inquiry. Point of parliamentary inquiry. And you can make it anytime. And then you can say, Mayor, can you help us know, is this the right way to do this? Or turning to the attorney, as the case may be. Yeah, it's great. It's great. Now, one thing I do want to mention, I saw when you took that vote on with that meeting that I was reviewing, a member raised a point of order in the middle of the vote. You can't do that. You can't do that. You have to let the vote be concluded and the result announced, and then you can bring up the point of order. But you can't interrupt voting. No discussion during voting and no points of order. Michael, you had a thought or a comment?
Yeah, so I was just going to compliment you on your book. In the career that I had before I retired, I was in charge of a union and with about 125 members. And so I had to drone through the Roberts Rules book, and it's a snoozer, but your book is very well written and very easy, putting it in layman's terms, I guess. So I just wanted to compliment you on that.
Well, thank you so much. I'm so glad to hear that. I've been doing a lot with unions recently, including a 4,000 member union in Toronto that regularly has Zoom meetings of 300 to 400 people. So difficult, you know, it's just not made for Zoom, those kind of things. So good for you. Thank you. Any other comments or thoughts? Well, I know this hasn't been new to you all, but I hope that there's enough in it that was valuable that you felt that it was worth your time.
It's always great to have it refreshed in our minds.
Thank you. Thank you, Sherry.
Thank you for your time tonight. We truly appreciate it.
I thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to work with you, and I wish you all the best.
I hope to see you in person soon.
I hope so too. May it be soon. Okay, bye-bye, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you, Ann.